Hi, I am Erika of Beadingschool.com. I love making beaded jewelry and I love sharing my tips and tricks with fellow beaders and to inspire them with interesting high-quality material. You can check them all out on my page Beadingschool.com, follow my social media channels, or even become a member of the Beading School Club on Facebook. In May 2021, I have the honor to be your guest teacher in the Seed Beads and More group, one of the biggest beading communities online. I will be teaching classes on the theme Creative Bead Embroidery. This is the second lesson in the series, and I am going to show you how to bead the Moonlight Sonata earrings. The goal of this lesson is to show you that you can embroider all kinds of various shapes, not only circles, and instead of starting with a focal component and beading around and around that focal until the motif gets big enough to be used as a pendant, brooch or else, this time we will start with the edges and we will fill out the middle with all kinds of beads and different sizes of cabochons afterward. What do you need to know in advance? If you haven't tried bead embroidery yet, then I would recommend starting with looking into my Traveler series. All the recorded videos of the lessons, the live Q&A sessions and the printable PDF files are available on my page. Before we start beading, I would like to tell you a bit about the inspiration behind the Moonlight Sonata. As the name suggests, of course, I like to listen to Beethoven's sonata with the same name, sometimes even while beading. But what exactly inspired me to make a beaded crescent? You might get surprised, as it's something completely different than classical music. A couple of years ago, I was asked by Flora Gattina, the burlesque queen of Amsterdam, to create part of her costume for a new act that she was putting together that time. She was dancing a moon goddess and wanted to have two pieces of identical jewels, one as a part of her crown and one as the closure of her cap. The jewels were to consist from phases of the moon, the full moon and on its sides two crescent shapes, the waning and the growing moon. The original design was later used for my Chandra Devi necklace in a slightly different way, with even more cup chain. But the crescent kept fascinating me and I had to revisit it one more time. What do you need for creating the Moonlight Sonata earrings? As it's made with bead embroidery, you will need a foundation where you will attach your beads and backing to later hide and protect the stitches. I prefer to use Ultra Suede as my foundation, and in this case I chose a piece of shiny metallic leather for the backside, as in my opinion, this special effect and color complement the theme perfectly. In case of bead embroidery, it's really nice that besides the beads, you can play with the texture and the color of the backing too, to add a luxurious finishing touch to your jewel. Normally, when embroidering smaller pieces, it's not absolutely necessary to use an in-between layer. However, in case of this shape, I recommend using one. You can use lace's stiff stuff, you can use a piece of thin waxed cardboard like I showed you during the Traveler lessons, or you can try a third way. An iron-on interface normally used by tailors when sewing belts or making buttonholes. You will need your favorite beading thread. I will use my 0.12mm 4LB black satin fireline. 1 or 2 needles. I like to use a size 11 tulip for the main part and a bit thicker one for the edges. You will need some glue to attach the backing. It doesn't need to be super strong, As afterward, you will also attach the layers to each other with tiny stitches all around. And what about beads? You will certainly need size 15 round seed beads. I used 3 different colors of round 15 Miyuki seed beads. Number 190, 190F and 457. Depending on the style, how you would like to fill in the middle of the motif, you might also need some other shapes and sizes. Besides the round 15s, I used Miyuki Delica 11s because of the peyote bezels, but size 11 round seed beads might also become handy. You can absolutely personalize your shape and fill it on many different ways. You can use different shapes and sizes of cabochons. If they are flat back, just glue and bezel them as we did with the coins in the Traveler or in the Tribute tutorial. If you would like to use cabochons with shaped backsides like I did, you will need to bezel them first. I used 3 peyote bezeled rivolis for the main part, one 10mm heliotrope colored Preciosa rivoli and 2 smaller 8mm glass rivolis in white opal color. Besides those, I included 3 and 4mm Preciosa Bicon beads too. If you are just starting to get familiar with Preciosa, then I really recommend to look into my curated selections of crystal beads and pearls that offer you a great opportunity to get a good overview of their cabochons and beads. You can get a box with 300, or in case of a maxi box, 400 crystals for a fraction of the price what you would pay if you bought them one by one. I used 2 different colors of cup chains, both in size 2.1mm S6.5. The light sapphire opal in the raw metal setting is incorporated into the main body of the motif, and the crystal aurum in raw metal setting is hanging at the bottom of the crescent. I love layering, and on top of the cup chain hanging at the bottom, I attached a glass drop in metal setting too. It's a 5x14mm glass drop in gray. You can absolutely personalize this part to your own style too. You can, but don't have to, add cup chain. You can add only a glass drop or a gemstone drop. You can use smaller or bigger components, or you can even have more bling and combine the glass drop in metal setting with a crystal connector, like I did at the bottom of the bloom earring. One additional thing that you will need is paper. I recommend to first draw the shape of the motif that you imagined on a piece of waxed cardboard instead of drawing it right away on your foundation. Especially if you would like to bead earrings and you need 2 identical shapes. You can design your own motif, or you can use one from the assortment of shapes that I put together for you to be used in your bead embroidery. You can use the beaded crescent as an earring like I did, or even as a pendant. Depending on the type of your jewel, you will need some additional components. A clasp for a necklace, or of course earring hooks for a pair of earrings. I used an elegant pair of gold earrings with a luxurious touch, a transparent crystal cubic zirconia inserted into a setting. As with nearly all of my embroidered pieces, I like to draw some lines on the foundation to help me get distances and proportions right. So I will use a pen and a ruler too. To learn more about what types of rulers, pens I like to use, and to listen to a whole broadcast about the basic tools and material that you need for bead embroidery, I recommend looking back at Coffee Time with Erika from the 4th of May 2021, or to find the article How to Start with Bead Embroidery on the blog at beadingschool.com. The motif of a crescent can be used in many different ways, not only as earrings and not only orientated in the way like I did. I can absolutely imagine it as the centerpiece of a necklace too, laying sideways, with the hollow side turning either up or down. Start by ironing the interfacing on your foundation. It's enough to cut out a bit bigger piece than the size of the motif that you would like to make, but make sure to have some extra so you can hold the fabric comfortably. This interfacing will keep your motif flat and sturdy. Make sure to place it on your ultra suede with the waxed side towards the foundation. Sometimes it's not easy to see the difference between the two sides. Look for a thin, shiny layer. That's the one that should face the ultra suede. This method is perfect for all kinds of different shapes. You can use it for smaller and bigger motifs too, and you can even create hollow shapes when you cut out the middle of a circle, for example. After ironing on the interfacing, draw the lines of the motif on top of the ultra suede. Since I intend to cover the shape completely with beads, I don't have to be too conscious about the choice of pen that I am using. Still, I try to use something that blends in, as I'm notorious about changing plans while already working on a jewel. My choice is a black gel pen, as it fits my grey ultra suede really well. I drew two guidelines on the shape intersecting each other in a right angle. One marks the middle of the crescent horizontally, and the other one is a line running from the earring hook toward the middle of the hanging part, where I will attach the glass drop in a metal setting. I found that the crescent looks the best if the two smaller rivolis are sewn exactly on this line. I start with the edges and I add size 15 round seed beads all around with back stitches, following the shape that I drew. I use double thread with a knot tying two ends together. You can use True To or Miyuki Delica beads for this part too, but remember that the smaller the beads, the easier it is to follow the line precisely. With size 15, the frame will be more delicate, but if you would like to give more emphasis on the frame, you need to use bigger beads, like round size 11 seed beads, for example. When you get to a corner, measure first that how many beads fit comfortably to the remaining space. It can happen that while you were always adding 4 beads at a time up until now, it will be enough to add 3 only. When filling in the last remaining gap, measure carefully that how many beads fit nicely. It's always better to go for less than for more. An easy way to make the lines of beads look smoother is to retrace the thread path and to fill the holes with thread as much as possible and just bead around through the beads a couple of times without beading up and down through the fabric. This way the beads can't move around that much and will form nicer lines. It goes faster if you are using double thread. If you would like to make the corners sharper, you can add a size 15 bead when reaching the corner. If by simply picking it up it doesn't stay where you want it to be, You can attach these corner beads to the foundation with a simple stitch up and down. When you feel that the needle doesn't fit any more times through the holes, then bead down through the fabric and finish off this part by tying a double knot. Do your best not to break a bead when you are retracing the outline. If you break one, it's not really possible to simply fill in a new one to hide the gap, as the new bead will be pushed out of the straight line by the previous thread. Now we can start filling in the middle. If you would like to add some cabochons, you have two possibilities. If you are using flatback cabs, then you can simply glue them on the fabric and bezel them with peyote like we did with the Traveler. If you have pointy back cabochons like the Preciosa and glass rivolis that I used for this, you will need to bezel them first with peyote stitch. If you need some help with peyote bezels, I recommend downloading the free Forget-Me-Not tutorial from my page to get you started. I already bezeled my rivolis, secured and trimmed all thread ends. I used two colors of size 15 seed beads for the front of the bezels to create a more organic look. Depending on the shape and size of your motif, you can use bigger or smaller cabochons, less cabochons, or even more if you would like to. The 10mm heliotrope from Preciosa goes exactly in the middle, slightly touching the outline beaded from size 15 seed beads on the left side. I attach it to the fabric by securing the Miyuki Delica 11 beads in the bottom row to the foundation. I keep tight thread tension, but I don't pull my thread too much, otherwise the base would get wrinkled. After the biggest cabochon, I move on to the rhinestone chain, and I will continue with the smaller cabochons afterward. I attach the rhinestones one by one, sewing up and down through the fabric, as I have shown you in the Traveler videos. I push the crystals next to each other without leaving a gap in between. Since there are small spaces left before and after the cup chain, I decided to add a single piece of size 15 seed beads on both sides to fill the gaps up. The color of the seed beads matches the foundation, as I want them to blend in with their surroundings. I attach the smaller rivolis in the same way as the 10mm one. They are touching the heliotrope rivoli and the cup chain gently, and they rest a tiny bit on top of the outline made of size 15 seed beads. I find that in case of a crescent, your jewel comes out really nice if you make sure that the earring hook, the two small cabochons, and the middle of the hanging part are all in one line. The space in the middle of the motif is filling up fast, but there is still enough for some Preciosa bicone beads. I added two 4mm bicones in crystal aurum and several more 3mm ones in matte crystal. I combined them with some more size 15 seed beads. I attach these beads at least with 2 stitches to make sure that they are secure. Now I can cut out the shape. The best way to make the lines nice is to use a pair of manicure scissors with short bent edges. Afterward, I glue on the backing and I cut out the shape one more time. In case that you are using waxed cardboard, then I recommend cutting the cardboard a bit smaller than the foundation and the backing, so you don't have to push your needle through the thick paper. With laces or with the iron-on interfacing, this is not a problem. I connect the two layers with so-called blanket stitches. I like to bead clockwise. Since my leather is coated to have a metallic, shiny surface, I need to be a bit more careful so I don't damage it. It's the best to bead from the back towards the front. When I reach the point where I would like to attach the earring hook, I pick up 3 round 15 seed beads, the loop of the earring, and 3 more round 15 seed beads. I retrace this part at least one more time to make it stronger, then I continue. Until now, I was sewing together the two layers without extra beads. Exactly opposite of the earring hook, I start adding size 11 Miyuki Delica beads. The exact number of beads depends on the number of cup chains you would like to attach. I used 4 pieces of cup chains, slightly longer and longer, and I added 7 Miyuki Delica beads in one row. You can use only 1, 2 cup chains, but even 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Just keep in mind to adjust the number of Delica beads that you add here. When you have enough Delica beads, add 2 more rows of Delicas on top of the first row with brick stitch. If you work with a thicker cup chain, then you will need to add more than 2 extra rows of Miyuki Delica beads with brick stitch. And you need to sew down the first units of the cup chains to this part made of Delica beads. Sew the first unit of the pieces of cup chains to this part made of Delica beads. I sew up and down through the beads in the bottom row. Before pulling my thread tight, I insert the last rhinestone from the cup chain to the loop formed by the thread. It can happen that you need to sew up through the same Delica that you sewed down through. In this case, before turning back, sew under the thread like you do it when you are working with break stitch or odd count peyote. I love layering components. Filigrees, drops, beaded parts, crystals, gems, and so on. For the Moonlight Sonata earrings, I used a 5x14mm glass drop in metal setting to add a little extra to this motif. First, I need to bead to the middle of the part made of Miyuki Delica beads. I did it by beading up and down through the Delica beads in the middle row. Then, very carefully, I pushed my needle between two Delicas to get to the front side. I pick up the combination of size 15 Miyuki round seed bead, the loop of the drop from back to the front, and one more size 15 seed bead. The first size 15 seed bead will create a little distance between the Delicas and the drop, so the drop doesn't sink in between the cup chains. The second size 15 seed bead will hold the drop in place. Bead back through the loop and the first seed bead. Then push your needle between the Delica beads again to get to the back of the motif. Bead through the Delicas to the edge of the ladder and finish connecting the two layers with blanket stitches. Secure and trim your thread ends. Your motif is finished now. When you bead the second motif, don't forget to mirror it to create a pair of earrings. I hope you enjoyed beading with me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your new jewel. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. I will do my best to help you. If you liked this tutorial, make sure to visit my page beadingschool.com for more. Follow my social media channels for more inspiring beading tutorials, and please recommend beadingschool.com by Erika Sandor to your friends. It means a lot to me and helps me to continue creating more tutorials for you. I am looking forward to beading with you again.